I had seen him angry before. I had seen him tired, frustrated, even defeated by the weight of the years on the farm. But I had never seen him collapse the way he did that night, standing barefoot in the mud as the storm crashed over the fields. Rain drenched his clothes and thunder shook the ground, but he didn't move. He couldn't. He was staring at the barn, at the place where everything had fallen apart an hour earlier, where his granddaughter had discovered the truth he had hidden from her since she was a child. She had always believed her mother died in an accident. That was the story he told everyone. A version polished enough to be repeated at church, at school, at every birthday she grew up celebrating without a mother. But inside that barn, behind an old cabinet, she found the police report he never meant for her to see. The real one. The one that said he was the last person who saw her mother alive. The one that suggested the accident wasn't an accident at all. When she confronted him, her hands were shaking, her voice breaking between disbelief and grief. "You lied to me," she whispered. "All these years, you lied." He tried to explain. He tried to give her the truth he had buried to protect her. But she didn't wait. She didn't want reasons. She ran, out of the barn, across the yard, into the storm, leaving footprints in the mud that the rain was already trying to erase. By the time I reached him, he was trembling harder than the lightning that split the sky behind him. "She thinks I hurt her," he choked out. "She thinks I killed my own daughter." And the storm swallowed the rest of his words. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the house was the way her absence changed the air. It wasn't just empty, it was wounded. The light over the dining table flickered, casting long shadows across the room, but nothing hid the truth. She had left in a rush that came from heartbreak, not anger. Her backpack still sat on the chair, unzipped, half full with school papers she never went anywhere without. A photograph of her mother had fallen to the floor, its frame cracked down the center, as if the house itself had reacted to what she had learned. I walked farther in, and the silence felt heavier with every step. Her knitting project, something she started after her grandmother died, was still on the couch, the yarn tangled in a way that suggested she had stood up fast, too fast to think, too fast to breathe. By the window, a mug of hot chocolate sat untouched, the steam already gone. She'd made it minutes before the truth found her. Minutes before her world cracked open in the barn. Across the hallway, the old man's coat was missing from its hook. His boots weren't by the door. He had gone after her the moment she ran, without thinking of the storm, without grabbing a lantern, without anyone to help him. A man who had lived his entire life by caution and habit had thrown every instinct away, because the person he loved most had looked at him with fear in her eyes. The storm rattled the windows again, but the real storm was inside that house. A storm built from years of secrets, unanswered questions, and a truth he had buried so deep he hoped it would die with him. But she found it, and nothing would ever be the same again. He found her tracks long before he saw the storm building over the ridge. The footprints were shallow at first, small, hurried, cutting through the soft dirt near the barn. But as he followed them, they became deeper, more uneven. Signs of a girl who wasn't just running away, but trying to outrun something inside her. Something heavier than the sky collapsing above them. He bent down, touched the edge of one footprint, and felt the cold water filling it. The storm would erase every trace of her if he didn't move fast. Lightning cracked, illuminating the open field for a split second. He scanned the darkness, calling her name, but the wind swallowed his voice. His chest tightened with a pain that wasn't just fear, it was guilt. Guilt that had been growing roots inside him for years, no matter how many times he convinced himself he had buried the truth for her own good. But the truth never stays buried. It only waits for the day someone has the courage, or misfortune, to dig it up. He reached the fence at the edge of the property, grabbing the wooden post to steady himself. The rain poured so hard it blurred the landscape, turning the road ahead into a river of mud. He imagined her there, slipping, trembling, still clutching the police report she had found. The paper would be soaked by now, the ink running, but the words, the accusation, would stay burned into her memory. The idea that the man who raised her might be responsible for the death she cried over her entire childhood. He tried to take a step forward, but his legs locked. The memories hit him all at once, the phone call, the sirens, the officer who couldn't look him in the eyes when he handed him the report, the argument he had with his daughter the night before her car went off the road. He had never told anyone how harsh his words were, how he regretted every one of them, how guilt had lived in his chest ever since, like a stone he carried to the grave. The thunder roared again, louder this time, shaking the ground beneath him. He leaned against the post, squeezing his eyes shut. He remembered her mother's voice. He remembered her laugh. He remembered the way she used to braid her hair on the porch steps. The granddaughter had inherited that same gesture, twirling a strand of hair when she was nervous. He had seen her do it earlier that day, right before she walked into the barn and uncovered what no child should ever discover alone. He forced himself to stand straight, wiping rain from his eyes. He didn't care how far she had run. He would find her. He would explain. He would fall to his knees if he had to. But he needed her to know the truth. He didn't kill his daughter. He hurt her. He failed her. But he didn't kill her. And the difference between those two truths was the only thing keeping him alive. Down the hill, a faint glow flickered near the old water tower. It could have been a lantern, or lightning, or her. A pulse of hope pushed him forward, and he climbed over the fence, the mud sucking at his boots. Every step felt like it dragged a decade of regret with it. He stumbled twice, catching himself on the wet grass, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Halfway across the field, he slipped hard and fell to his knees. The shock of the cold mud shot through his bones. For a moment he stayed there, trembling, letting the storm punish him. He whispered her name again, softer this time, almost like a confession. The rain mixed with his tears, indistinguishable in the darkness. Then he heard it. A sound carried by the wind. A sob, fragile, broken, coming from the direction of the water tower. He stood up so fast he nearly fell again. She was out there, and she was crying. He moved toward the sound with a desperation that pushed past the ache in his knees. Every step splashed through puddles. Every breath burned as if the storm itself was trying to drown him. The glow near the water tower pulsed again, faint but steady. He prayed it wasn't his imagination. He prayed she hadn't already run farther into the valley, where the old riverbed became a trap during heavy rain. He didn't care about the cold anymore. All he cared about was reaching her before the storm, or her fear, swallowed her completely. When he finally reached the base of the tower, he paused, letting his eyes adjust to the shadows. The lantern was there, hanging crookedly from a nail on one of the support beams. The flame inside it flickered weakly, fighting the wind. And nestled beside it, curled into herself, was the silhouette he had been searching for. Her shoulders shook with every breath. Her hair clung to her face, drenched and tangled. She looked nothing like the fearless girl who grew up climbing haystacks and racing through the orchard. She looked small, fragile, terrified. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Sweetheart," he whispered, but the word dissolved in the wind. She didn't look up. She hugged her knees tighter, as if trying to make herself disappear. He knelt a few feet away, careful not to touch her until she allowed it. His heart pounded with a rhythm that felt older than his body, an ache born from years of holding back the truth. "You weren't supposed to find that report," he said softly. "Not like that. Not alone." Her sobs grew louder, raw. She pressed her forehead to her knees. "You lied to me," she choked. "My whole life." "You lied." "I know," he whispered, "and I'll carry that until my last breath." For a moment, only the rain answered them. He looked at her hands, mud-stained, trembling. In one of them she still held the police report, the pages bent, the ink running where her tears had fallen. Seeing her gripping that paper felt like watching her hold a piece of his soul torn out and exposed. "He didn't protect her," she whispered. "He didn't save her. You were the last one who saw her alive. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell the truth?" Her voice cracked, and the question carved through him like a blade. He steadied himself, inhaling sharply, because this moment, this painful moment, was the one he had feared for years. "Because I lost control," he finally said. "We argued that night. I said things no father should say. She ran out of the house. I followed, but not fast enough. I heard the crash. I saw the lights." His voice trembled. "And I thought, God forgive me, I thought she died because of me." Lightning struck somewhere behind the trees, illuminating the agony on his face. The girl lifted her head just enough for her eyes to meet his. They were swollen, red, and filled with a pain he had spent years trying to prevent. "But you didn't push her," she whispered. "You didn't harm her." "No," he said, shaking. "Never. I failed her, but I never hurt her." She looked away, tears mixing with the rain. "Then why did the report make it sound like you did?" "Because the officer who wrote it didn't know what really happened. And I never corrected it. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to relive that night." The wind howled through the beams of the tower, rattling the old ladder beside them. The storm was getting worse, and the cold was seeping deeper into her shaking body. He inched closer, careful, gentle. "Let's go home," he whispered. "We can talk inside. We can look at everything together. I won't hide anything from you again." For the first time, she didn't pull away. She didn't answer either, but she let him put his hand on her shoulder. It was enough. A fragile beginning, a single thread of connection in the middle of the storm. And in that moment, he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to believe until now. She hadn't run because she hated him. She ran because she didn't know how to survive the truth alone. They walked slowly through the field, the mud gripping their shoes as if the earth itself wanted to keep them there. He kept a careful pace beside her, close enough for her to lean on him if she wanted, but not close enough to make her feel trapped. She held the wet police report against her chest, the pages crumpled beyond saving. The lantern swung from his hand, its weak flame casting trembling shadows across the broken landscape. Neither spoke. The only sound was the rain softening into a steady drizzle and their footsteps sinking into the soaked soil. Halfway home, she stumbled. He reached out instinctively, catching her by the elbow. For a moment, her body tensed, unsure whether to pull away or let him steady her. Then, exhausted, she allowed it. He felt how cold she was, her skin chilled, her clothes clinging to her like layers of ice. "We're almost there," he murmured, his voice low, careful. She nodded without looking up. Her breaths came shallow and uneven, the kind that came from holding too many emotions inside at once. When they finally reached the porch, the storm's remnants still dripped from the roof. The old rocking chair sat crooked, knocked over from the wind or from the moment he'd run out to chase her. He picked it up without thinking, setting it back in its place. An instinct that revealed more than he meant to. He needed things to be where they belonged, but tonight, nothing was. She climbed the steps slowly, her wet socks leaving faint prints on the wooden boards. He watched her pause by the door, as if unsure whether she could walk into a home that no longer felt familiar. Inside, the house greeted them with a silence heavy enough to bend the air. She removed her shoes mechanically, then walked toward the fireplace without waiting for him. The fire had died hours ago. The ashes glowed faintly, fighting to hold on to their last breath of warmth. He crouched down and began placing logs inside the pit, but his hands trembled. The lighter slipped once, then twice. She watched him struggle until she quietly stood, walked over, and held the box out to him. Their fingers didn't touch, but the gesture alone felt like a door opening a crack. He lit the fire. Flames crawled upward, flickering against the walls. The warmth grew slowly, casting an orange glow across her face. She sat down on the rug, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the flames as if they held all the answers she couldn't yet ask. He sat a few feet away, not daring to get closer. The truth sat between them like a wounded animal, silent, breathing, waiting. She broke first. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was tired, bruised. "Why did you let me grow up thinking she died peacefully? Why did you let me blame myself for not remembering her clearly?" He took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the floor. Because I couldn't even forgive myself. I thought if I told you the truth, you'd look at me the way your mother did that night, afraid, disappointed, and I couldn't survive that again. She wiped her cheek, not realizing tears had started falling. But hiding it didn't protect me. It only made it worse. He swallowed hard. I know, and I'm sorry, I was a coward. I thought I was doing the right thing. But it was fear. Just fear. The fire crackled, filling the quiet between them. She unfolded the soaked police report, flattening the page on her knee. It says you were the last person she talked to, she whispered. But it doesn't say what you said. He looked at the flames, shame burning deeper than the heat. I told her she was irresponsible, that she didn't care about her daughter, that I was tired of cleaning up after her mistakes. I said things no father should ever say. And an hour later, she was gone. The girl pressed her lips together, struggling to breathe through the truth. So it was an accident, she said softly. Yes, he whispered. A terrible, tragic accident. But I lived every day believing my words pushed her into it. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw not a monster, but a broken man carrying a punishment he had sentenced himself to decades ago. And for the first time since the storm began, something inside her softened. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled softly, warming the air, melting the storm's chill from their skin, and slowly, painfully, from their hearts. She stared into the flames as if trying to find her mother's face somewhere inside the dancing light. He watched her with quiet desperation, afraid to speak, afraid of saying one wrong word after years of saying too few. The truth lay between them like shattered glass. Each piece sharp, each piece capable of cutting again if they weren't careful. She finally set the police report aside. It slid across the rug, water dripping from the edges. All these years, she whispered, I made up stories in my head. Stories about who she was, why she left, why she never came back. Her voice trembled on the last sentence. But none of my stories felt complete because I didn't know the truth. He lowered his head. I took that from you. I thought I was protecting you, but I only stole your chance to grieve honestly. She closed her eyes, tears gathering again. When I found the report, I didn't even know what I felt. Anger, fear, betrayal. It was like the ground disappeared under me. She exhaled shakily. I wasn't running from you. I was running from everything I thought I knew. He nodded slowly, each movement heavy with regret. I understand, and I don't blame you for running. His voice faltered. I blame myself for giving you a reason to. He looked toward the window where the last drops of rain trickled down the glass. Your mother and I, we were complicated. She was wild, impulsive, full of fire. I loved her, but I didn't always understand her. And that night, I was tired and angry, and I let my temper speak louder than my love. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. Is that why you never talk about her? Yes, he answered softly. Every time I tried, the guilt tightened around my throat. I couldn't say her name without feeling like I didn't deserve to. He swallowed hard. But keeping her memory locked away only hurt you. And that is something I will regret for the rest of my life. She stared at him, studying the lines on his face. The years, the loss, the weight of a sorrow carried too long. She saw the tremor in his hands, not from the cold, not from age, but from fear. Fear of losing her the same way he lost her mother. Fear of being left alone with nothing but ghosts and storms. Gently, she reached for the picture frame that had fallen earlier. She lifted it carefully, brushing a thumb over her mother's cracked smile. What was she like? She asked, her voice small, but steadier than before. He blinked, taken by surprise. You want to know? Yes, she said. I want to hear it from you. Not from a report, not from silence. He inhaled, and something shifted in his chest. Like a door he had kept locked for decades finally creaked open. She was stubborn, he began. Too stubborn for her own good. She loved music, hated mornings. She used to dance in the kitchen when she thought no one was looking. She laughed so loud the neighbors could hear. His eyes softened as memories rose to the surface. And she loved you more than anything. From the moment she held you, she said you were her chance to start over. A tear slipped down the girl's cheek, this one warm, not cold. Why didn't she come back that night? She whispered. He took a shaky breath. Because I pushed her too far. I didn't hit her. I didn't hurt her with my hands, but my words, they cut deeper than I realized. She left to clear her mind, to cool down. She told the officer she would only drive around the block. His voice broke, but she never made it back. The girl covered her mouth, a sob escaping. He reached out, not to pull her closer, but to offer a place where her pain could rest. Slowly, hesitantly, she leaned in. Her forehead touched his shoulder. His breath hitched, as if the simple contact was forgiveness he didn't deserve. I'm here, he whispered. And for the first time since the storm began, they faced the grief together instead of alone. The fire crackled softly as she lifted her head from his shoulder, eyes red, cheeks tear-stained. But for the first time since the storm began, her breathing was steady. He watched her carefully, afraid that any wrong move might pull her back into the same darkness that had made her run. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater, then looked at him with an expression he had not seen in years, an expression mixed with pain, hesitation, and the faintest spark of trust. I don't know what to do with all of this, she whispered. It feels like every memory I had shifted. I know, he said quietly. Truth rearranges everything. It's painful, but it's better than living inside a story built from fear. She hugged her knees again, her gaze drifting to the window where the last traces of rain glimmered under the porch light. Her voice was barely audible. I hated finding that report, but I hated thinking you were a stranger even more. He swallowed hard. I'm not a perfect man. I made mistakes, terrible ones. But I have loved you with everything I had left. He paused, letting the words settle. When your mother died, I lost a part of myself. But you kept me alive. Her eyes softened, and for a moment she looked like the child he used to carry on his shoulders through the orchard. The girl who asked endless questions. The girl who trusted him completely, before secrets built walls between them. She reached for the report again, spreading it gently on the floor. The ink had bled badly, but some words were still readable. She traced a finger across the line that mentioned him being the last person to see her mother. This part, she murmured. It made me think the worst. He nodded. I know, and I let that stand because I believed I deserved suspicion. But I didn't hurt her. Not physically. My biggest crime was failing her emotionally. He exhaled sharply. And failing you by not telling you earlier. She turned toward him, her expression trembling between accusation and compassion. If you'd told me the truth years ago, maybe it wouldn't have hurt so much. He nodded with devastating honesty. I was selfish. I hid behind silence instead of courage. He looked at her with eyes full of sorrow. But if you give me a chance, I want to change that. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and walked to the mantel, where a dusty wooden box sat untouched for years. She had seen it 1,000 times, but never opened it. Tonight, something drew her to it. She brushed off the dust and lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, folded carefully, tied with a fraying ribbon. What are these? She asked. His face paled. Letters your mother wrote. She left them in that box the day before she died. She blinked, stunned. Why didn't you give them to me? His voice cracked. Because reading them broke me, and I thought they would break you too. Her hands trembled as she picked up the first letter. The handwriting was elegant, looping, unmistakably her mother's. She scanned a few lines, tears rising instantly. The letter was full of love, pure, aching love. Apologies, promises, hopes for the future, regrets she wished she could undo. She loved me, The girl whispered, her voice breaking. She really loved me. He nodded, tears filling his own eyes. More than anything, don't ever doubt that again. The letter slipped from her fingers as she collapsed into his arms, sobbing openly. Not from confusion this time, but from the surge of clarity that finally put her mother's memory back where it belonged. He held her tightly, shaking just as hard. "I'm so sorry," he whispered into her hair. "For the lies, for the silence, for failing you, for failing her. I'm sorry for everything." And for the first time, she didn't pull away. She clung to him with a desperation that spoke of years of longing for truth, for connection, for the family she thought she lost. The storm outside had ended, but inside that small house, a different storm, one made of decades of grief and unspoken love, finally began to calm. The next morning rose quiet, washed clean by the storm that had battered the valley through the night. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, illuminating the scattered letters on the table, each one a piece of a past that no longer felt like a wound, but a bridge. She sat with a warm blanket around her shoulders, reading her mother's words, slowly, letting each sentence settle into the places inside her that had been empty for so long. Across the table, her grandfather prepared breakfast with trembling hands, glancing at her every few seconds, afraid she might disappear again. When she finally looked up, he froze. She held one of the letters, the one where her mother wrote how grateful she was that her father had stepped in during the hardest years of her life. "She trusted you," the girl said softly, her eyes shining with lingering tears. "Even when things were complicated, she trusted you." The old man pressed his lips together, overwhelmed, as if her words had lifted a weight he'd carried alone for decades. Something inside him eased, a fracture that had been waiting years to heal. She stood, walked around the table and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm not running anymore," she whispered, and for the first time since that terrible night years ago, he allowed himself to believe he wasn't losing her. He was finally getting her back.